Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtadarshat Shishmat His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Ki Mayapur Ki Jagannath Kshetra Ki Ganga Maya Ki Yamuna Maya Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki Samavena Bhaktivedanta Ki. All glories to Sangha devotees, all glories to Sangha devotees, all glories to Sangha devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Shri Radhe. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Goranitai, 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 Jaya Goranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Gunata ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Jai. So, Hare Krishna everyone, Hare Krishna dear devotees, for those that are watching online, a warm welcome. Hopefully soon it's coming to an end. And for those also in the temple, Hare Krishna. Today evening we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 25. So what I'll do is I'll read the Sanskrit, then the transliteration, and then the translation. And please follow through if you can. Today is quite a challenging day because we're also fasting. Some of us may be feeling a little bit fatigued, a little bit tired. The mind may not be functioning as well as it would on a normal day when we're eating prasadam. But nevertheless, it's a purification, and it's a good time really to focus more on the holy name, on Krishna Katha, and proactive discussion that can help us to progress in our spiritual life. So before I continue, I just pray for the mercy and the blessings and the prayers of the devotees, both online and offline, and that please do pray for me that I can say something useful, something helpful, meaningful, and something also for my own purification. And forgive me for any offense. I try my best really to repeat just what Prabhupada says to the best of my understanding and ability. So if I do say anything wrong, then please do forgive me and correct me. You can correct me online and you can correct me offline. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna. So today we're reading from chapter 4, verse 25, Transcendental Knowledge. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, good. Okay. Right. Devam iva pariyagnam yogina parupashate Brahmagnav apare yagnam yagne naivo pajuvati Devam ivapare yagnam yoginaha pariyupashate Brahmagnav apare yagnam yagne naivo pajuvati Devam ivapare yagnam yoginahe paripashate Brahmagnav apare yagnam yagne naivo pajuvati Listen. Devamiva Paryagnam Yogina Parvajate Paramagnava Paryagnam I feel like I forgot the most important thing to say right now, so I'll just do it. It's better late than never. Om Jnana Timandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmei Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashachade Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, it's always nice to invoke auspiciousness. Okay, so transliteration now by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Devam in worshipping the demigods. Eva, like this. Apare, some others. Yagnam, sacrifices. Yoginaha, mystics. Paripushate, worship perfectly. Brahma, of the absolute truth. Agno, in the fire. Apare, others. Yagna, sacrifice. Yagnena, by sacrifice. Eva, thus. Upajuvati, offer. Translation. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some other sacrifices in the fire, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman, or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factually, sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Vishnu, who is also known as Yagya. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely sacrifice of worldly possession and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possession for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possession to satisfy demigods such as Indra, the sun god, and others who are impersonalists, sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material function like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifice according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bah-Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others who worship the impersonal features of the absolute truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire and thus end their individual existence by merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such impersonalists sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possession for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifice his material designation with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For in the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna conscious person like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus he is the first-class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. So once again, Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome for all those watching online and all those present with us. For me, the most important thing really is to take what Prabhupada has written and to take what Prabhupada has said and try and really share it from my own understanding. So first of all, I want to just reference another verse, actually a verse just after this verse, which is Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 26, which mentions how some of them sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind, and others sacrifice the object of the senses, such as sound in the fire of sacrifice. So we know in Krishna consciousness that there's a different types of yagya, there's a different types of sacrifices, and we understand also that those that perform such sacrifices are considered as yogi. But one of the most important thing is that, and this was something I was just thinking about, how yagya is really meant to be followed according to the Vedic scriptures and ultimately to try and please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that it mentions it in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto and 2nd chapter, how really and truly the goal of our activities is to be able to identify whether the Lord is pleased with us or not. So this is what it is. Activities are really intended to serve the Lord, to please the Lord. But now we know that sometimes some of us may not necessarily and entirely be up to that level where we can focus on the Supreme Lord and we can directly serve the Supreme Lord. And I want to give an example, but before I give an example, I just want to share just how much the Supreme Lord loves us and, you know, how much he really wants us back to him, back home, back to Godhead. And so as a result, we'll find in the Vedic scriptures that there are many form of yagyas that we can do to also please the demigods. Because ultimately by performing yagyas, by performing sacrifices to please the demigods, indirectly we're also coming to Krishna. Not directly, but indirectly. And for me, like when I read this and when I've understood this, it just shows to the degree that Krishna is prepared to go for his devotees. To the degree that Krishna really wants his devotees back. To the point where it's like, okay, you know, you may not be at that stage where you can really perform your sacrifices directly to me and you can surrender to me, but nevertheless there is other means, other ways of going about it, where you can also in an indirect sense also serve me, in an indirect sense also please me. And one of the examples that just came to my mind, and actually Srila Prabhupada was mentioning this, is that, let's take, for example, just as in an office, someone may work in an office, and really the ultimate goal of working in that office, of being in that office, is that you want to serve your boss, you want to please your boss, not anyone else. And so that is really our situation in this world, that the purpose of life is to love God. The purpose of life is to serve God. The purpose of life is to offer our sacrifices to the Supreme Lord, who is the proprietor of everything that is in this world. That is the stage that we're trying to come to. And ultimately, by performing yajna to the demigods and pleasing the demigods, what it is that it's an evolutionary step that we can take to get to that stage. Where we can come closer to Krishna, where we can understand our constitutional position with Krishna, where we can ultimately render yajna, we can render service to the Supreme Lord. But that's just one example that Srila Prabhupada was mentioning. Activities are actually meant to satisfy the Supreme Lord, and all of those activities are prescribed in the Vedic literatures. And in one sense, is that we're acting on behalf of the Supreme Lord, and this is what's called yajna. So the most important thing is that actually we should try and very well to inquire why we're doing what we're doing. We should know very well the activity, why we're actually performing our activities and for whom we're performing our activities. Otherwise, and I'm sure many of you that are watching this online and many people sitting here, we've experienced it, that when we don't know the intent behind why we're doing what we're doing, when we don't know the purpose and the intention, then what it is that we can very easily find ourselves entangled. We can very much easily find ourselves attached to the results of what we're trying to do. And as a result of it, we really lose the focus of why we're doing what we're doing. So it's really a matter of questioning. That skill of questioning is so important. Before we perform any activities, before we do anything, asking ourselves, for whom are we doing this for? And for what is the purpose and the reason behind why we're performing this, why we're doing this? And the more we can do this, then the more we can avoid, and of course by the mercy of the Lord and the mercy of the devotees, we can avoid entanglement and bondage in this material world. And that's what karma bandhanaha means. It means that if we're not working for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, if we're not working for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, then what happens is that we're actually getting more and more reactions for the work that we're performing, and we're being binded in this world. We're being binded in a world that is unnatural to the constitution of who we are, to our natural happiness and our natural inclination to serve. So we're becoming more and more binded in this world. And yeah, we practically see what the result of that is in the world today. As a result of people not having a clear vision and a clear understanding and a clear reasoning and logic behind why they're doing what they're doing. We're exploiting the planet, we're performing sacrifices, and not just performing sacrifices for the wrong reasons, but with the intention of not knowing who Krishna is, not wanting to know who Krishna is, for the intention of wanting to enjoy and to continue exploiting as much of the material resources there are in this world as possible. But like I've mentioned, there's a reaction, and that's the most important thing really to remember. And the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that actually Krishna consciousness comes to you at where you're at, and then it takes you to a gradual elevation. That's the amazing thing. I've never come across such a process where it works with you at where you are and helps you and builds you up to the ultimate goal of life, the absolute purpose of life. And that's what this yajna system really is. And actually, if we look at it also, that's what varnashram is for. It's to work with you where you are and to help you to gradually get to where you can absolutely get to. But again, this is really down to our desire. This is really down to our level of surrender to Krishna. And I'll talk about that more later on. So the yajna system is planned in a way that, you know, you can fulfill whatever desires you have, but ultimately with the intention, with the purpose that to come closer to Krishna is the ultimate goal. Otherwise, I don't know if you've experienced it or seen it, but it can be quite difficult to advance in spiritual life when you're still holding on to things inside. It can be very difficult to try and make any progress when there are certain things you're clutched to. Yes, externally you may be practicing the process, you may be chanting, you may be reading, but now if you don't address the challenges that you're also experiencing internally, that is more important to deal with, and this is ultimately what can create that passageway to be able to make an advancement. One of the most important things to remember in Krishna consciousness is that it's not so much about what you do or what you've achieved, but it's about who you're becoming in the process. And that's why this yajna system is there in the sense that it helps you to also address what is internally, the desires that you're internally experiencing, and then purify those desires ultimately. And then work and function in the world in a way that you want to serve the Lord and you want to please the Lord, and the Lord becomes your lover and the Lord becomes your ultimate goal. Now that's a perfect stage, and hopefully we can all get there. But yeah, that's what the process is really there for. Krishna says to Arjuna in chapter 3, Karma Yoga, text 16, "My dear Arjuna, a man who does not follow this prescribed Vedic system of sacrifice certainly leads a life of sin, for a person delighting only in the senses lives in vain." And when I was reading, it just kind of like one thought immediately came to my mind, how in this material world we are willing to make permanent decisions based on temporary sensual feelings. And as a result of it, we actually come further and further away from Krishna. And really, honestly, the reality is that we're, in one sense, looking to come closer to Krishna. After all, that is who we are. We're parts and parcel of the Lord. We're like the spark, and He's like the flame. So it's natural that we want to be with Krishna, we want to be close to Krishna. But how can we be close to Krishna if we're not endeavoring and we're not working in a way that we're showing through our effort that we want to come closer to Him? And so that's one thing that came to my mind, that we make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. But Srila Prabhupada said that these temporary feelings is like a fly that kind of, or fly that lands on your arm, and then you're scratching and you're scratching. You're trying to kind of relieve that pain. But the more you're trying to relieve that pain, and yes, temporarily it may go away, but then the fly comes back, and then it comes back, and eventually you scratch yourself so much, and you may feel a relief, and that relief is not because situations have gotten better or anything is going better, is that now you've just come to a point where you're bleeding. Or another example he gives is that how the camel chews on thorns, and it thinks it's enjoying the thorns, but really it's bleeding. So this is what it is. Sometimes we may make a decision, and those decisions may not be according to the Vedic scriptures. It may not be according to Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and we may be experiencing some level of happiness, some level of enjoyment, but it's temporary. And ultimately, it is something that we'll have to depart from, something that we'll have to let go of. And one thing that I was mentioning earlier on was how this yajna system is really amazing, in the sense that one thing that also came to my mind is the 4 types of people that come to Krishna. So we understand that the 4 types of people that come to Krishna are those that are distressed, those that are seeking for knowledge, those that are seeking for wealth, and those that are seeking for wisdom. And the beauty really in all these 4 types of people is that ultimately, if they're sincere, whether they're distressed, whether they're seeking for knowledge, whether they're seeking for wealth, whether they're seeking for wisdom, whatever it is, if they're truly and really sincere in the path of bhakti, and they're really and truly sincere in seeking out for the Lord, is that ultimately they'll arrive to the point of coming to the Lord. And we have examples of people like Dhruva Maharaj, who ultimately came to Krishna with a different intent, but then realized that ultimately what he was looking for, he was seeking for shattered of glasses, as he said, but really what he was looking for is the real thing. So we know that whoever it is that Krishna comes to, and whatever it is that they're asking for, ultimately they can come to Krishna if they're sincere. And that's really the most important thing to remember, that there are different activities, and those who are not Krishna consciousness, the yajna system is planned in such a way that the sensory conscious person may satisfy their desire without becoming entangled. So what I was mentioning earlier on, that if we follow this yajna system correctly, and with the right intent, with the right focus, then ultimately we can be free from entanglement, we can be free from the reaction, we can be free from sense gratification, and we can come closer to Krishna. And here's the most important thing to remember. Sometimes in spiritual life or material life, we think that we're accomplishing and achieving things by our own endeavor. Like, how many of you have experienced that you do things and you're like, yes, I've done it. Yes, I've accomplished things and I've achieved things. But the most important thing to remember is that actually the prosperity, the success of your life, the prosperity of your life, whatever it is, it's not so much dependent on your own effort, but actually is dependent on the background arrangement that Krishna is actually making. Now, that's so really interesting. We work so hard, tirelessly, trying to achieve a certain results, and we don't necessarily achieve it. Why is that? It's because Krishna is ultimately arranging everything. And one of the really most important key thing I like to remember and think about here, and I was mentioning earlier on in the talk, is how Krishna ultimately loves us. Even though we're trying to separately enjoy from him, he still loves us. Like, one of the pastime I was just kind of reading, it's not so much connected to this, is Sudama and Krishna. Sudama being the friend of Krishna, and how ultimately Krishna became a king in Dwarka, and Sudama became a beggar, a poor Brahmin, and he didn't have anything to feed his family, he didn't have anything to give to his kids. But Krishna, eventually when Sudama came to Krishna, Krishna welcomed him with an open arm, with love, served him, fed him, took very nice care of him. And this is the Supreme Lord that we're speaking about, that actually when we open our heart to him, when we open our mind to him, when we genuinely and really want to serve him, when we really want to dedicate our life to him, then he welcomes us with an open heart. Then he's prepared to take a seat in our heart and to guide us. So it's not also so much about what we can give, it's not so much about what we have, but it's just about how sincere we are. It's like, how much are we endeavoring to try and really understand the Supreme Lord, to befriend the Supreme Lord, to invest in this relationship with the Supreme Lord. And that's such an important thing to remember. Sometimes it's like we see Krishna, and Srila Prabhupada says this, we see Krishna as our someone that our proprietor, our what's that right word? Someone in our life that gives us just what we want. We see Krishna as someone that, we can call that landline, hey Krishna, I just want this, can you give it to me? Order supplier, yeah. We see Krishna as our order supplier. But if that is to the degree and the extent of the relationship that we've established with Krishna, then we can't expect anything more. We can't expect anything more. But now if we open our heart to him, and if we truly and really let Krishna in to guide us, then what it is that he will expose us to so much more potential that there is in our spiritual life, that there is in ways of really getting out of this world. We're not trying to enjoy this world. We're not trying to live and be in this world as long as possible. We're trying to get out of this world. And when we open our heart to Krishna, and why are we trying to get out of this world? It's because this world, no matter what we ask for from the demigods, everything is temporary. We lose it. And sometimes what it is that what we get develops false pride. What we develops a sense of that we are the proprietor. But now we also know from Sri Ishopanishad that really and truly everything belongs to Krishna. Everything is Krishna. Krishna is the proprietor of everything. We may think that we're God in this world. We may think that we're God in a country. We may think we're God in the community. We may think we're God in society. But as Srila Prabhupada was saying, that we're minute in comparison to Krishna's absolute power. There is actually, in fact, there's no comparison. So everything belongs to Krishna, and ultimately the Vedic system, the Yagya system, ultimately everything, all material things that are around us is so that we can come to that conclusion that beyond material nature, there's transcendental nature. And that transcendental nature is really Krishna, the absolute. Secondly is that, and that's why it's so important to recognize that in today's world, the sort of mentality, the sort of philosophy that really is spread out is that work very hard and enjoy your sense gratification. You know, Muhammad Ali said, that suffer now and live the rest of your life like a champion. But we know that this kind of mentality, this sort of mindset, this approach to life is condemned. And it leads us more and more and more to a degraded life. And that's not the sort of life that as devotees, as Vaishnavas, as those that are aspiring to become the devotees of the Lord are aspiring for. We're more aspiring for an attitude of selflessness, an attitude of service. We're not so much concerned about ourselves. And this is something that I'm so beautifully inspired by Vasudev Dutt. The mood of really that, and Srila Prabhupada says this, that, Krishna consciousness means feeling the suffering, feeling the challenges, feeling the pains of other people. And not just feeling it, then that leads to compassion, and that compassion means to then want to do something about it, and to do something about it. Not just wanting is good, but actually executing. So this is not the sort of mentality that we're trying to develop where we work very hard and we enjoy our sense gratification, because that leads us further and further and further away from naturally who we are in spiritually speaking. And so, like I've mentioned, because Krishna doesn't want us to fall to such a degraded position, because Krishna doesn't really want us to continue sinning and sinning and sinning, as a result, he's created all these, you can say, sacrifices, like these kind of Vedic injunctions. You can find them in the Bhagavad Gita, you can find them in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Krishna is clearly directing you that, okay, you may not be at where I would ideally like to see you at, but that's okay. Here is the process, here's the system. You follow it, and then eventually you'll come to me. And unfortunately, one that chooses not to follow these regulations, one that chooses not to follow this system and this process, continues to be condemned, continues to live a life that is unfulfilling, that is unhappy. They may think they're happy, they may think that they're fulfilled, but I call it that in the sense they are experiencing a spiritual suicide. They're experiencing a devoid inside of them, a vacuum that no matter how much accomplishment, how much success, how much growth, whatever it is that they make in this world, they'll never be able to truly and really be free from it. The only solution, the only way to be free from such a spiritual suicide is through the practice of Krishna consciousness. It's through performing yajna only for the pleasure and for the service of the Lord. And here's the most important thing that I want to mention, and this wasn't scripted, this was more of my own self-realization, my own realization, is that, okay, sometimes we may ask for certain things from the Supreme Lord, and we may not necessarily get it. Does that mean that the process of Krishna consciousness is not working? Does that mean that the Supreme Lord is not sided with us? Does that mean that the Supreme Lord doesn't exist? I've seen it many, many times in life where people pray to God. They pray to God for certain material benefits, for certain material things, and it doesn't work out, and suddenly they lose their belief in Krishna. They lose their belief in the Supreme Lord. How many of you have experienced that? I know I've experienced it when I asked God, hey, give me the good grade that I want to get, and I didn't get that good grade. I was like, okay, I don't know if this Supreme Lord exists. But, as funny as it may sound to us, this is sometimes what we experience in our spiritual life, a spiritual futility, a spiritual decline. And why? Because over mundane things. So Krishna may not necessarily always give us what we want. And that's not really to say that he's not there. Krishna is everywhere. Krishna is always there. He's present. He's omnipresent. But what it is that while we have sense gratification at the forefront of our focus, he has our spiritual interest at the best of his heart. What he's looking at more is that if I give my devotee, if I give this person what he wants, how will it spiritually benefit him? How will it help him to come closer to me? So he may not necessarily always give us what we want, but we find in life sometimes he gives us what we need. He gives us the medicines that we don't want. And that medicines may be very difficult to take. But should we take it, then we can actually be cured from our material disease, from envy of the heart, which ultimately causes poison to our spiritual life. I guess I can talk more, but we have like a few more minutes, and I'll just leave it for questions and answers. But yeah, it would be really nice to communicate with everyone that's online. Thank you so much. If anyone has any question.
Thank you, Prabhu, for a wonderful class and wonderful wisdom as well. Quite a few good things that I took from today's class, and one of them is whatever activities we're endeavoring to do, ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this activity? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this for my own sense gratification? Am I doing this for my own pleasure? Am I doing it for material reasons, or am I actually doing it to get closer to Krishna? And that's an important question that I'll definitely keep in mind more in the future. I was kind of conscious of it, but not really. So thank you for that beautiful reminder. And I also liked what you said about the spiritual suicide and work hard, play hard, because I can relate to that. And I've experienced that spiritual suicide, and no matter how much you were getting from the outside and all the benefits and everything, material benefits, it just felt very empty inside. And Krishna is indeed so merciful that he does bring us to him. I guess if I had a question was, yes, this all sounds beautiful, in theory, but how do we ensure that we take all of this wisdom on a daily basis and apply it to our decision making, and also just remember to pray to Krishna for eternal things and not for material things? Do you have any suggestion, or is this something that you do in your daily life that helps you with that?
I think this is something that my mentor told me, and I've mentioned it many times. The beauty of Krishna consciousness is that it doesn't limit our imagination. We think big. At the same time, and I think this is the most important thing, is that somehow we need to really refer to Srila Prabhupada's books. What it is that we're not really lacking spiritual enthusiasm. We're not lacking spiritual answers. What it is that sometimes we're just not looking for it. And I think because we're not looking for it, we're trying to really move forward in our spiritual life with what it is that we already have in our head, rather than expanding that. Like a personal experience is that, okay, when I first joined the ashram, there was many challenges I've went through. And sometimes I thought like these challenges are just unresolvable, that I'm never going to overcome them, that there's practically no answers in the world that I can find. But the thing is, Srila Prabhupada has left so much instructions for us. He's left so many wisdom for us. And not just wisdom, he's also left so much practicality, practical steps, practical things that we can do in his purport. Like when I read his purport, I feel like I'm swimming in nectar. In a sense, it's just whatever challenge I'm going through, Srila Prabhupada has the answers. The scriptures has the answers. The Bhagavatam has the answers. So I think what it is that when we read Srila Prabhupada's book and we scrutinize it and we read it with devotees and we really ask ourselves, what I'm reading right now, how is it relevant for my life? How is it relevant for the challenges that I'm going through? Then we develop naturally a growth mindset. We develop an expanded mindset where now we're utilizing spiritual vision to resolve our material challenges. Otherwise, what it is that material intelligence, material wisdom, just like scientists, the Sankhya yoga, the Sankhya philosophy, they're researching through all these material natures, but it's just an ever-ending going in circle. It's like they haven't come to any conclusion. But when we use bhakti yoga, and then we combine bhakti yoga with also Sankhya yoga, basically studying the material nature, studying the different things in the world, studying ourselves, studying our challenges that we're going through, then ultimately we can come to the conclusion that, yeah, the answers are in the Bhagavatam, the answers are in the Bhagavad Gita, the answers are ultimately to deepen our relationship with Krishna. And that's another thing that my mentor tells me, that sometimes the reason why we lack confidence, the reason why we're suffering so much is because we haven't established a deeper enough relationship with Krishna. You can see that devotees out there that have developed a deeper relationship with Krishna, even though externally, like I can think of a few people right now, even though externally they may be suffering and they may be going through challenges and difficulties, but because they've developed that friendship, that relationship with Krishna, and Krishna says that I'm always protecting my devotee. They shall never perish. There's no diminution. Whatever progress you've made, there's no loss. Krishna says all this. He's trying to comfort us. He's trying to tell us, like, hey, look, materially you may go through a lot of things, but spiritually I'm protecting you. And so what it is that when we understand that, when we really connect with that, then we develop fearlessness. We develop a sense of courage to be able to move forward in whatever direction, as long as we're kind of following within the guidelines that Srila Prabhupada established for us. Practical steps speaking is just really, as Srila Rupa Goswami says, it's just making the scriptures our companion. Making the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, our friend, our companion, our guide. It's like our guidebook to life. And when we can do that, the scriptures can guide us through the challenges of the world, the challenges of this material world, and the suffering that is yet to come, that is happening and that has happened. And where ultimately we can experience spiritual bliss internally.
Thank you. I guess I have another question if nobody else has one. So we are human beings in this life, and we will have certain material desires. Is that wrong to speak to Krishna about them? Because it's obviously all about creating a relationship with Krishna and opening our heart. And he already knows our wishes, and he already knows our desires. And obviously, if those desires are not to have a fancy car, for example, but something that, because we are material, we are humans in this material world, we will have certain desires. I guess my question is, should we bring those in front of Krishna, or should we sort of repress those?
We're not trying to be impersonalists. This is something I used to do a lot when I was following my practice faith of Islam, that I can't go with the material desire with the Lord. Krishna is ultimately a person. Just like you would go to your friend and you would reveal your heart to them in confidential. The same thing we can do also with Krishna. Krishna is a person. Krishna, we should feel that we have a relationship with Krishna. And that relationship means that we be as honest as we can be. If we have material desires, we have material desires. And we talk with Krishna. We communicate with Krishna. Krishna, I have these material desires. What do you think? Do you think, what do you think? Is that something I should follow with? Or do you have any other suggestions? Do you have any other thought on this? What's your saying on this? So we communicate with Krishna. We present those desires in a way that we can try and learn, like, is this really what I need right now? Is this really what I want? Or is this just another trick of Maya? Is this another trick to try and deviate me from my spiritual life? So I think that's the most important thing. Relationship means communication. And if we're not communicating, then what's the use in that relationship? It's a broken relationship. And that's what it's like. I've experienced it also in my own life, that sometimes we go in front of their lordships like, yeah, I just don't have any connection with them. And the reason why we don't have connection with them is because we're not being honest with them. If we're honest with them, if we have an open communication with them, then we can establish a pure relationship. So yes, you go to Krishna, you tell Krishna, I have material desires. I'm not going to deny that. I'm attached. I want this, and I want it bad. But you know what's better for me. So if I want this and you really also want it for me, yeah, give it. If not, then help me to become purified in this process. Help me to see this material desire for what it is, so that I can be disgusted enough by it and I can move forward. So it's really just a matter of communication.
Thank you.
I just only want to give one comment on this topic. We was reading in Nectar of Devotion on Bhakti Shastri that actually it's not good to suppress our desires. It's not the point in Krishna consciousness, because it's impossible. We are still human beings. We have desires. So we have to just transform them with spiritual meaning, with of course help of devotees and with Krishna. Like you were saying, talk to Krishna, just like you have a relationship with friends or with your parents. Just talk with him, like, yeah, he's also a person. And I found it like the best way just to find a shelter. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. Whatever material skill set that we have, whatever material qualities that we have, what is the use in it if we're not using it for the service of the Lord? There's so many leaders out there, like if we look and observe the world, so many people that are gifted with beauty, with intelligence, with success, with wealth, with fame, with qualities that is beyond our comprehension and our observation, but without really spiritual substance, without a spiritual foundation, then it's meaningless. It's like, I remember reading it from Radhanath Maharaj's Journey Within book, that is basically as useless as the sand. If one has material qualities and material abilities, or has whatever qualities and abilities, but they have no humility and they're not using it for the service of the devotees and the Lord, then it's practically as useless as sand. And yes, we don't want to suppress our emotions, because if we suppress our emotions, then where is the space for bhakti? Where is the space for devotion? Externally, it's like there's duplicity in that. Externally, we're presenting one thing to the Lord, but internally, we're desiring and we're meditating and we're thinking about something else. So we haven't really learned to give our heart to Krishna. The process of Krishna is that we're trying to give our heart to Krishna. We're trying to give ourselves to Krishna. But that can only happen if we address what material desires that we're confronted with. We don't try and just subside them. Like it says in the Bhagavad Gita, we try and engage our mind in devotion, in service. We try and engage our mind in something higher. We're not trying to kill desires. We're not trying to kill thoughts. We're trying to just engage in them. Otherwise it's just voidism. It's like there's nothing. There's nothing in my mind. I don't have any desire. Or I do have a desire, but whatever, it doesn't exist, It's like, that's not what we're trying to do.
I would just ask a quick question also, Moonpoo, about in terms of like material desires and preaching. I was wondering, how do we preach to someone who might think that this is very austere, and in terms of Krishna consciousness, that how can we? I wonder how can we go about preaching to them that it's to make it more favorable to them.
We engage them. Everyone has a particular inclination. Everyone has a different interest. Everyone has a, like I was just kind of sharing this with someone. How do we preach to those people that think that this kind of process is austere? Really, the way I see it is that we build a relationship with them. We build friendship with them. And what it is that we work with them at where they're at, and then gradually we give them and we show them the bigger picture. And that's something that Srila Prabhupada beautifully demonstrated and showed. Sometimes we have these unfair expectations when we go out there. We're just like, yeah, you know, here's a book. Now you've got to become a pure devotee. Now you've got to give your life to Krishna. But really, Krishna consciousness is a process of building relationship. It's a process of building friendship. And we try and sustain that friendship and relationship for as long as possible. And what happens over time when they get the association of devotees, of course, through your friendship, because ultimately you're the ones who've given them the book. You're the ones who've invited them to the temple. You're the one who's cultivating them. So of course, with you supporting them by their side, and doing so consistently and doing so with the right heart set. Not the heart set like I'm going to convert them, but with the heart set that I'm here to love them. I'm here to help them to realize their constitutional position. And if that means I've got to lead more by example than speak. Remember, as Sutapa Prabhu was mentioned in his CC class, that there's many ways to teach. We don't just teach through speech. We teach through deferrals. We teach through example. We teach through elimination. So what it is that the more we befriend them, the more we develop a relationship with them, the more we engage in a conversation with them. And that conversation is not that I have the intention to try and convert them. I have the intention to try and share with them. And then they can share with us, because what makes a good communicator is also a good listener. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed us in his conversation with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, that your preaching starts from the moment you start listening. It doesn't start from the moment you speak. So when you can become a good listener and you start listening and you really start paying attention and you really start relating and you really start caring, then you've got the preaching going on. Then slowly what it is they warm up to you. They open up to you. They start to trust you. They start to feel like this is my friend. This is not just another religious person or a spiritual person that's trying to convert me. And people only care when they know how much you care. People will listen when you're invested in a relationship, not in trying to achieve a certain result. So when you can establish such a relationship and such an approach in your Krishna consciousness where it's so much more about getting to know people, trying to work with them and where they're at, then what it is that they naturally become friendly to you. And as a result of it, they're more open to listen to you. They're more open to take a book from you. They're more open